Just a reminder to everybody that, of course, our meeting is being broadcast this morning. Yes, exactly. Thank you. And we'll begin with a karakia. He honore, he karoria ki te atua, he maungarongo ki te whenua, he whakaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. Hanga e te atua he nākau hau, ki roto, ki tena o mātou. Whakatongia tō wairua tapu he āwhina, he tohu i a mātou, he ako hoki i ngā mahi mō tēnei rā. Āmene.
Amen.
And I'll just translate that. Honour and glory to God, peace on earth, goodwill to all people. Lord, develop in us a new heart inside all of us. Instill in us your sacred spirit. Help us, guide us in all things we need to learn today. Amen. Now, do we have any apologies? Councillor Ollie for lateness, thank you. Could I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Sholem. Seconder, thank you, Councillor Lawson. All those in favour, please say aye. And do we have any requests for leave? No, thank you. And just a reminder about conflicts of interest, and reminding councillors that they need to stand aside or declare them, please. Now, moving to item 3, confirmation of minutes. Would someone like to move the confirmation of those previous minutes? Thank you, Councillor Dixon. And a seconder, please. Councillor Watkins. All those in favour, please say aye. Now, our first item for consideration is the Hawke's Bay Museums Trust Statement of Intent. And we have here today the chairman of the Museum Trust, and I'm going to invite him to come forward and speak to us. In the hot seat here, will be fine.
Through you, Madam Chair. So just while Dr. Grant is finding its seat, the statement of intent for the Hawke's Bay Museum Trust would ordinarily have come to Council for feedback through March or April. Given the circumstances of that time and the timings of some of our meetings, that didn't happen. Although the Trust had furnished a draft statement of intent within the time frame that they're required to. So this is their final adopted version, and it's good to have Dr. Grant actually in the country for the receipt of this report. Can't go anywhere this time, so thank you for coming in.
Would you like me to start, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
Thank you. All right, so I push this one.
All right. You're good.
Oh, good. Okay. Madam Chair, councillors, thank you very much for the invitation to come along and speak to you. If I can pick up Mr. Allen's flippant remark, I do apologise that previously your scheduling and mine hasn't quite coincided, but COVID-19 put an end to that conflict, and here I am. I think probably you're going to want to ask me questions, so I'll keep my presentation short because there's quite a lot happening at present with the Museums Trust. I just need to say a couple of things about this statement of intent that you have in front of you. It's been affected by two things. One is COVID and how we actually processed it through in the time of lockdown. That affects not only the Trust, but it affects you. As a council, we weren't able to get it through quite in the time frame that the regulations and the law requires. So, as Bruce said, it's a little bit late, but it is the statement of intent that the Trust adopted before COVID struck. The second thing is that when last year the Trust was working on the statement of intent, we said to both your council and to the Napier City Council that given the amount of activity that is going on in the joint working group, it makes no sense for us to set out a statement of intent for 2022, which is what this document has as its end date, when there are significant factors in play which could alter quite substantially what this document looked like in 2022. So we said to Napier and we said to Hastings, and you agreed, that we will present this statement of intent without any major change to make it simpler, to adapt it when the joint working group comes out the far end of its tunnel and your two councils have had a chance to assess its recommendations, because they will impinge very heavily on the statement of intent, on the trust and the work of the trust. So it's pretty much what the statement of intent 2016 to 2019 said. And if I can put it in slightly light-hearted terms, it's very much a vanilla statement of intent. Its best purposes, we'll do our best to do various things. I mean, this is the statement of intent that your council and Napier City Council have had in front of you pretty much for the last 10, 12 years. So those are the sort of preliminary remarks I wanted to make. And if I could go on, I just wanted to say one thing to you, which is, as the Hastings District Council, I mean, the Trust appreciates very much the support you give us. And although we are fairly remote from you in governance terms, it is very much in your interest and in our interest for Hastings to be involved intimately in what the Trust does. You may recall that I came to you 2 years ago and spoke in this chamber about the work of the Trust. And I said to you, you have to have in mind what sort of regional institution you want the Trust and the museum to be. And that led to the formation of the joint working group. And as I said at the joint working group meeting last week, in 5 years of chairmanship of the Trust, this process is the first time that I have seen both councils fully engaged in trying to work through the issues that the Trust faces. Now that's very important, not just for you because you pay $1 million a year to the Trust's operating costs. It's very important because the outcome of the joint working group process will probably, in my view, produce an option for you that will give you a much better understanding of what happens, a much better approach to the work of the MTG and the Trust, and also a much better outcome for your ratepayers. So I'll pause there. Madam Chair, I'm very happy to take questions, comments, whatever you would like.
Right, we're now open for questions. Thank you, Councillor Dixon.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Can I just add on to what Dick's been saying, being the chair of the Working Party? It's going exceptionally well. Good to have Richard here and Mike Parker's on it and Sophie. So we've got 4 of the Working Party here today. There's 4 key areas for us: the collection, the building, the governance and the management section, and the financing of the whole thing. The collection's probably about 40 million, as you can see in this paper. It's a regional collection and it's growing. So that's one of the things. It needs to be stored, it needs storage, it needs to be displayed, it needs a research component. So that's that first issue. The second issue, it's agreed that the building should be in Hastings, but it must be fit for purpose and it must meet all the conditions that are required to store a collection. Buying existing is cheaper than a new build by streets, but it needs the capacity to hold the collection and expand. So the current thinking at the moment is the Briscoe's building on the corner of Queen and Hastings Street. But we're doing our due diligence. Sorry, oh, it's public. Okay, that's the current thinking. The governance, we looked at other models, council owned and operated. They've got a trust board, or you can have an independent trust or a CCO trust. So there's two types of trusts you can actually have. And financing, that's an issue that we have to address further, how it's all going to be funded. But you're going to be getting reports in stages as we conquer each of these stages, rather than a whole combined thing together. So that's just an update on where we're at, but it's tremendous having Dick and Mike as experienced people around the table with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Lovely to see you, have you with us. I'm not sure who this question's for, but the cost to care for this collection, can we compare that to the cost of caring for other collections? Do we sit high, low, in the middle? Is this collection so unique that we cannot compare the cost to care for it against other collections?
No, I mean, the costs are about average for what we've got. There are a couple of peculiarities about this collection that you need to bear in mind. One is that it's at $40 million of valuation. It is easily one of the most asset-rich of any collection in the provinces in New Zealand. So, probably with the exception of the Auckland Museum collection in Auckland, this is probably the best collection of Maori taonga in the country. So, the valuation of the collection is affected very heavily by that. And that means, of course, that the preservation, conservation costs associated with it are slightly higher than you would say find in Palmerston North or Tauranga or Nelson. And the second factor to bear in mind is that this collection of yours has been put together for over 100 years. So this is not a museum like some of the other museums in the country whose collections are of relatively recent value and recent provenance. There was an institution, a pre-museum, if you like, on the current site of the MTG in 1856. This institution is actually older than the Metropolitan Museum of New York, to give you a comparison. So the financial costs of it are about average, but there are aspects of the collection which are very different. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Corbin.
Thank you. My question is on the financial targets, and I see that the councils, Napier and Hastings, are substantially funding the revenue, and look to be doing that on an increasing basis in the future. Have other forms of funding being investigated? Cultural and heritage, there's an emphasis on teaching children history, and I imagine the collection would fit both of those criteria. So has the trust looked at other forms, or is that council's job to tap into those other forms?
Thank you. It's a very complicated question because in the governance structure that you have at present, the trust doesn't control the display of the collection. The museum staff are staff of the Napier City Council. And the display process and the running of the museum is seen managerially as a function of the Napier City Council, which is why the Trust has its contract with the Napier City Council to run the museum and display it. The Trust itself has, with the exception of the assets that I've described, the Trust itself has very little money. We don't get paid as a trust, but it's all voluntary. And our ability to go out and raise money depends very much on what we're going to raise money for. Other sources of finance are available to the museum. So, for instance, as you know, the Crown, the central government, gave $6 million for the establishment of the MTG. You gave $1 million, Napier gave $6 million, and there was a bit of other financing. So that wasn't done with the trust. That was not the trust's responsibility. Likewise, the museum applies for and gets grants of finance for operating from other sources. For instance, the museum runs an educational program for schools in Hawke's Bay, which is very popular, and that is financed either by Te Papa or the Ministry of Education. But again, it is not the responsibility of the trust to do that. So one of the complications for you and for Napier and for the trust as we move through the discussions of the joint working group is, can you come out with a governance model that enables other streams of finance to come into play? And the example I have given in the joint working group is that of the Manawatu Art Gallery, which is a trust, and where the trust runs the museum, appoints the staff, does the exhibitions, raises the money, gets financed by Palmerston City Council and the Manawatu District Council, but also the trust is able to go out to major businesses in the Manawatu region and get funding from them. So their funding model in Palmerston North is very different from ours. So if you look at our balance sheet, we've got $40 million worth of artwork, and we've got a budget per year of about $600,000. Most of that we can't touch because it is given to us in trust for specific purposes of the museum and the collection. So if somebody said to me, well, listen, you've got $600,000 sitting in your balance sheet and we want to do a $200,000 feasibility study, we want you to pay for it, I would have to say we can't do that without liquidating our reserves. So it's not a satisfactory model, and we need to work together to come out the far end to give you a financial model that is clearer, better governed, and also more stable for the future. Answer your question?
Councillor Watkins.
Thank you. Dick, in your view, looking forward, do you believe that the exhibition, wherever it might be or how it might be presented, should always be free entry?
You asking me as the chairman of the trust or as a ratepayer in the city of Hastings?
Well, as the trust. I mean, we've seen $15 entry fee didn't particularly work well in Napier. Now I believe it's free entry. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, the short answer is that one of the prime objectives of the trust is to make sure that the collection is available to the people of Hawke's Bay. And if you charge $15 to see it, you're not going to get that, are you?
That's what happened, yeah.
But when you look around the world at institutions, and COVID-19 is going to burn institutions, there will be a very strong temptation for costs to come back on. I think it's a mistake, but there will be pressures. I don't agree with them myself, because I think that the charitable purposes of the trust and the civic responsibilities of the trust is to enable the people of Hawke's Bay and visitors to see as best they can what a magnificent collection you have. And you can only do that by saying to people when you go to Napier, or if the storage complex is built here when you go to Hastings, go and look at the museum. It is one of the best collections in the country.
Thank you, Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is actually about the report. Will you take that question now? So I acknowledge that the recommendations today are really just receiving the statement of intent. My question is around, 4.5. So obviously the statement of intent somewhat justifiably has included inflation adjustments under the grant funding requirement, but I do note the report says we currently have not provided for the inflated costs as part of our annual plan. At what point will we be looking at that? Because that presents an issue, obviously.
We'll be looking at that as part of our long-term plan moving forward. So for this financial year, there might be a small gap between what the statement of intent is forecasting and what's in our budgets. But to ensure that gap doesn't widen over the years, we'll certainly be needing to look at that as part of our long-term plan deliberations.
Great, thank you. May I ask a follow-up question? So my question is for you around that small gap, given it might just be for this financial year. How does that impact the trust?
Well, if there's a small gap in the operating costs that we pay for the MTG, we would come back to you and come back to Napier and say there's a gap. As I said before, we don't carry operating costs on our budget. And it's the peculiarity of this model that in these circumstances we expect, and I mean, I guess history has led the trust to expect that the cities of Napier and the cities of Hastings will meet their due share of the operating costs.
Thank you.
Councillor Barber.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Dick. Thanks for the statement of intent. I support the notion of having a collection storage facility here in Hastings, and the ability to exhibit some of the works. We had a there was a portrait, a Lindau portrait bequeathed to the Wanganui Museum. This is just last week. Anyway, it was bequeathed to the Wanganui Museum, but it was held here at the gallery, and it's one of our Waimarama ancestors, one of Te Akitai's daughters, Harumi Te Ata. She's got lots of uri here in Hastings. Well, she's from here, so she's got plenty of Waimarama uri that are here. Anyway, but that was bequeathed to the Wanganui Museum. Been sitting in an accountant's office here in Hastings for a while. But so yeah, I guess if we had something here, local collectors, they might look at bequeathing it locally. I was a bit hoa that it got bequeathed to Wanganui, and I did put a tono that it should be staying here, that Wanganui people can go home without the painting. but you know how it is under LA law. Those things are written up. But it just, if we had alternatives here with those collections, because there's lots of Māori collections that aren't actually. I know we've got a big collection of Māori artifacts that aren't displayed, and having that option to do that in Hastings would be great. So yeah, I mean, is that something that people look at? They look at Napier, think, nowhere to display things here. I think bequeath this to Wanganui instead. Out of the area, no relationship to the iwi or the hapu of the people. You know, I mean, is that something that you think happens? Because I couldn't help but think that portrait should be locally available to our people, but for some reason, people looking outside our region to gift these valuable, not just valuable as in monetary value, but valuable as in heritage value outside the region.
I wonder if was it a gift of to Wanganui or a loan?
I didn't see the paperwork, but I'll have to look into it. We're going to go over there and have a bit of a wānanga with them, but
Well, you realise, of course, that
they said it's bequeathed. Yeah, was that a gift or?
Yeah, that's a gift, a bequeath.
of the museum. Okay, because currently in the MTG there is a wonderful display called Ronganui of Maori taonga in the collection, and funnily enough, the tiki of Kānunu
I did mention that.
is
Came back
on
from-
loan from the Wanganui gallery. So I wonder if there's a bit of reciprocity. To address your wider question about how you deal with having taonga more accessible so that not only iwi but others can see them is quite a considerable issue. There are two factors at play right now, which I'll describe to you, and there are factors in the future which you need to bear in mind, and which I'm sure under Councillor Dixon's chairmanship, the joint working group will consider. The first is, as you know, the current display space of the MTG is severely afflicted by the decision of the Napier City Council to put the library on there. So we've lost, or the museum has lost, I can't say we, museum has lost 60% of its display space. So that's an immediate factor. I mean, we can see the end, of this process, but for the museum director to plan and display the collection is really a challenge at present because of that. And she is doing, in my view, and in the trust job, she's doing a great job with what she's got, and that museum has been revitalized as a place displaying local content out of our collection. The second issue is a bigger issue, Councillor Barber, and it relates to your consideration of what attitude you take towards the proposal that Councillor Dixon mentioned concerning the storage site, possibly in the old Briscoe's building. If that comes to fruition, and if that is planned carefully, and if that is financed properly, you will have, I would say, almost all the storage of the collection here in Hastings. Almost all, because at times there will be rotation out of it as the museum makes use of it for display. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that you've got 100% of the collection in storage. What we are saying, we the trust are saying to the joint working group is, part of that you can design in this building so that visitors will be able to get much better access to the collection. It won't be a free visit. You won't walk into the building and say, I'll go and look at this, but there will be a part of that complex, we hope, that will enable particularly taonga to be brought out and to be viewed properly. And that way, not only will you have more public use of the collection, but you will also have here in Hastings a much stronger museum collection that is part of the heritage of Hawke's Bay. So those are the sorts of consideration. And in the longer term, you raise the question of bequests. Without the storage complex, the museum trust collection right now finds it very hard to, not, we can't refuse bequests, but it just adds to the storage problem. You know, we chuck up another couple of shelves in the Bat building in Napier and put it there. So if you're going, I mean, it's a very, very good point, because provincial museums around New Zealand are sites of attraction for people who want to bequeath valuable works. And at present, if you were sitting up in somewhere in Hawke's Bay with a valuable collection and you looked at the MTG and it's 60% occupied by the Napier Library and there's no storage except in the Bat, and the financial model doesn't look too hot and the governance requires an Einstein to work it out, are you going to sort of step forward and say, yep, I'm going to give it to you? So that's the long term.
Mayor Hazelhurst.
Kia ora, thank you through you, Madam Chair. Dick, it's great to have you present the statement of intent today, and my question was really around access, so you've pretty much covered what I'm thinking, but I just, those, where the performance targets are in this year's statement of intent, have those been, has the trust sat with the museum and identified those performance targets in terms of access, in terms of how many collections a year, where those collections will be? That's my first question. And my second one is around our Hastings City Art Gallery and the relationship there with access and exhibiting some of the collection there.
Okay, so the first, Madam Mayor, answer to your first question, the targets set in the SOI were presented to the Trust by the Director of the Museum for the Trust's discussion and adoption. So those are professional targets set by the professional director, not by the Trust, okay? But the Trust accepted them because they are consistent with what we know we're capable of doing. On the second question about the Hastings City Art Gallery, there are a couple of reflections that the Trust has on that. The first is that up until now, and I know because I saw the scaffolding there this morning, the status of the City Art Gallery makes it difficult for the Trust to agree to lending articles because of air conditioning and other requirements. So our insurance cover, our responsibility as trustees make it difficult for us to lend articles which go out into a non-museum compliant environment. You know, because you and I have talked about this before, that the work that you are doing in the City Gallery should bring that up to a standard where the Trust would be able to meet its obligations to itself and to its insurers. So when that work is done, you, I assume, will ask the Trust if from time to time works in the Trust's care can be lent to Hastings for display in the gallery. And I think the Trust, once it has the technical side sorted out, but I'm sure the Trust would be willing to do that. Again, looking further out, you have to, no, you don't have to. I think it would be sensible for you to look at where the gallery fits in to the complex of MTG Napier, Storage Hastings, City Art Gallery. Because right now the City Art Gallery has, here, just over here, has a reputation for doing very good exhibitions of travelling material. I mean, you don't have much of a collection in Hastings, so they've got to get their stuff in from elsewhere. And they do a good job. They've got good exhibitions, and increasing the status of the building will help you do that. So you may end up with a division of labour, if I can put it that way, where the MTG does what it's still doing, the historical display of museum collections that reflect the life and history of Hawke's Bay, and that the modern art exhibition will be the responsibility of the Hastings City Art Gallery, because that's what it's set out to be. So you would then have complementary institutions in both cities. Hastings doing modern art and travelling exhibitions with the occasional exhibition or items borrowed from the MTG collection, and MTG spread out across its building, which was originally designed to run a series of exhibitions showing the people of Hawke's Bay and visitors the depth and strength of its collection. That's a governance decision that I'm sure the JWG will have a look at.
Councillor Nixon.
Thank you. I appreciate that the primary purpose of this paper is the statement of intent, but it does say, talk about an update of the progress on the working group.
Yeah.
And obviously, let me start again. The issue of the storage has vexed us as long as I've been on council, probably a long time longer than that, particularly when the museum turned out not to have the amount of storage that we thought it was going to have. So the question I've got is, in the light of significant government funding for so many projects, not necessarily arts, but just COVID-related projects, do we fit into any of the criteria to sort of get assistance from that direction? And what steps, if we think we are, what steps have we taken to try and access help from that direction?
I'll defer to the Chief Executive, if I may.
So building off the good work that Dick, along with Malcolm and the joint working groups done, we've presented an application to the government for co-investment in both sort of arts infrastructure, arts access and support for the arts producing community. That's being worked through with the Crown at the moment. The Crown have announced significant investment in culture sort of funds, and we're just kind of working through as they're establishing the criteria for that, but we have put forward a pretty considered investment proposition to the Crown that would support what we've been talking about this morning.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we were engaged, because I don't think we've been told that before.
It comes back a wee bit, Councillor Nixon, to the issue I raised before, which is the trust itself is not a viable body for the Crown to deal with, whereas the City Council is. Okay, and the museum is also, but the trust is sort of somewhere out there. You know, we're sort of playing third 15 rugby out in Taradale when everybody else was playing first 15 rugby at McLean Park. Yeah.
Councillor
Thank you,
Dixon.
Madam Chair. Happy to move the recommendations, and I'd like to personally thank Dick for the valuable contribution that both him and Mike made to the working party. It's tremendous having them on board, so thank you to that.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Sholin. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you, Dr. Grant.
Thank you. Can I just reiterate, Madam Chair, the gratitude of the Trust for the support from the Hastings District Council for our work. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, moving to item 5, which is the Consolidated Operations and Monitoring Report, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Allen and Mr. Cameron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what you've got as a separate attachment to this report is, I guess, a first take of what we want to start developing for this committee from a performance monitoring perspective. So it is, it's very much a work in progress. It's not the finished product, but to use our chief executive's phrase, we didn't want to let perfection get in the way of getting something out to you. So that's what we've done. I think it's a good start around trying to cover off everything that goes on in this organisation, which when we first sort of had a look at trying to summarise it down and distill it into a concise report, became problematic given the vast sort of expanse of what council gets involved in, and particularly when we look at this report and the period that it covers. So we had an Ops and Monitoring Committee in February that covered off the 6 months to December, and we haven't had the opportunity to have another meeting since. So a lot has happened in that time, things that we hadn't planned for. But one of the things that we had planned for, and it sort of, seems a long time ago now, but it happened within this quarter, and one of the things that I think we celebrated at the time and recognised again now is sort of, we opened Toi Toi after 5 years of it being closed, and the celebration that we had around that as well. We had a successful summer season with Splash Planet and with our pools. We were doing quite well in the delivery of our capital program as well, as we were working our way through it. It was an ambitious capital program, and I think if it hadn't been for the impacts of COVID, we would have delivered something in the vicinity of sort of $85 to $90 million worth of capital. So, which would have been the biggest year that we've ever delivered from a capital delivery perspective. The organisation, I think, responded extremely well to COVID and what came about in that space, and the team had the foresight to start planning for what that could look like from a business continuity perspective as early as late January, and that held us in good stead when we needed to transition everyone to working from home and to ensure that our essential services were delivered. There is a financial element to this report as well. It's not a quarterly update like we would normally provide to you, but it's the dashboards that we normally give you on a quarterly basis, but with a sort of a COVID-related lens to it to sort of highlight the impacts that COVID's had on our business financially. Income, as you would expect, has been the hardest hit, and the report and those dashboards actually take you through a little bit of those impacts and how that's flowed through for the organisation. We had a good 9 months leading up to that, income-wise, across the organisation and almost all facets of the organisation. So really what COVID's done is brought our income targets or forecasts in line with budget. So that's been the impact of that, and obviously with COVID, the organisation has incurred some additional costs as well, which we're going to have to manage as we work through the sort of the year-end process, and we will report that year-end result to you fully, like we normally do, in mid-September. So yes, I'll probably just hand over to the chief if there's any additional comments.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Allen. Yeah, I mean, what I'd like to kind of reflect on is building out of the response phase. Obviously, one of the things working with you as our elected representatives has been to move pretty quickly into the recovery sort of planning. And whilst that's a separate conversation today, I think again really sort of proud of the work that the organisation's done, the range of government funding that we've attracted that's designed to support our objectives for Hastings, but with a particular focus on employment. And that's whilst I think we allude in the reports that there's more to come. What we've achieved to date has been pretty significant around the investment that we've attracted into Hastings. Obviously, we've just recently, and again through the period concerned, recut the whole sort of annual plan and budget, and have adopted an annual plan and struck a rate. But probably just want to touch on a few things in terms of the things that are most important to this council in terms of the long-term objectives you've set for the community around drinking water as our number one priority, Homes for Our People, our CBD, and to kind of reflect that, we've made some fairly significant progress, notwithstanding COVID, over the course of the year, in the drinking water space, that we've got really good momentum with the small community water upgrades. We're well advanced on our urban drinking water treatment plants. That in Homes for Our People, it's only 7 months ago that the Crown turned up to Waipatu Marae and announced that Hastings was the pilot for a place-based program, and on project delivery, we're starting to see very good momentum around obviously public housing being delivered, but also our Papakainga housing being built, our Healthy Homes initiative with the District Health Board, that and the growth-related housing across, whether it's Lyndhurst, striking the DCs for Howard Street, Brookvale, that we have got really good momentum going in, that strategic area of focus, that in our coastal communities with the Waimarama seawall, the work that's been advanced around Cape View Corner, and then into our CBD, as we again have attracted investment from the Crown, and work's underway with Downers in terms of Eat Street, Queen Street in front of us, MSD Contact Centre with 60 staff opening in the CBD. So when you kind of stand back from it, I think, quite a lot of momentum over the 2020 year to date that, I think we can be, well, I'm certainly as the Chief collectively proud of the efforts of the staff in terms of a range of our momentum and delivery. But I'll close by noting, as Bruce said, one of the challenges is how we sort of present access to all the information around just the breadth of what's going on in this organisation across all the things that the council does, whilst kind of calling out for you some of the key things from a governance perspective around where we've got some pressure or some risk points or things that we're actually needing to bring to your attention in terms of managing our reputation or direction on these really important areas. But I think it's a start, and one of the things that we'll be looking for from councillors is where do we need to focus on to continue to evolve this reporting for you to fulfil your governance role.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two comments. Firstly, what a robust, wide, in-depth, high-level, complex, but very simple report to read. So well done. What I really liked is I can just read the report at the front and get a sense of where we're at. Second bit is I look at the COVID stimulus package that we put together and how effectively that worked, and the decision-making that happened so quickly around that, and also the funding that we've been able to get from beyond ratepayers funding. So congratulations to all involved. That's been quite simply an outstanding response. And then to read that the Hastings economy is doing well compared to the rest of New Zealand is another something I think we need to give ourselves a pat on the back, because decisions made within council have a rollout effect across the Hastings district. So congratulations.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to echo Councillor Kerr's comments, and in particular say I appreciate the simplicity and yet complexity of the risk and assurance section in particular. I really liked seeing that projected out future issues and what we're doing to think about those already. Certainly notwithstanding COVID, and also taking into account the holistic momentum that we definitely have, and I do want to commend the staff on that. My question that I have is around the report in the Our Economy section. So looking at page 27 specifically, I'm aware that certainly council is in no way, shape or form sitting on its hands. However, when I look at the graph under CBD Centre capital spend, I see we are far below budget, and I just wondered if we could have a little bit of information on that, what that graph actually represents, so that anyone else casting their eye across this understands.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think one of the key drivers with that, and you'll see on that graph, it actually took us quite a while to actually start getting underway, and that was largely driven by, I guess, the time that it took to adopt the strategy and the plan to implement for the team. So that's sort of part of the reason for the delay in getting started now. But now that they're underway, they're making good progress, as you can see.
And I just wonder if we, through you, Madam Chair, have a mechanism in which to update those that we've consulted with, particularly with that plan. We went out to the wider business community and told them our plans in terms of timing rollout. And I understand that things shift and change, but I'm interested to understand how we're communicating to those we consulted with and who engaged with and very much supported the plan, just to make sure that they're aware of where timing now sits.
We'll bring that back. We'll have to go back and talk to the team. But I think, there's constant communications with the team that are involved with this, with those that are affected in the CPD. But we'll bring something back more formally as a response.
Thank you.
Councillor Barber.
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on the last page of the page 3 of the financial report, just looking at the capital spend year to date, I mean, we're quite a bit under, maybe 30% under what we're planning. And just thinking about the Three Waters funding that's about to come down, and, there's going to be an expectation that that's spent in 12 months. I'm just, I guess the question is, how are we going to manage that, with being a little bit behind on some of our projects? Yeah.
So I think in the Three Waters context, obviously, when we think about where we're at in our program and what's in front of us, across our two urban treatment water plants, that's over $30 million in itself. The small community water program, whilst that's circus, is about 6. Which is well advanced. The decisions that this council's taken recently around things like in the stormwater space with legacy issues like Lowe's Pit, I don't anticipate any problems in terms of the Three Waters funding and being able to commit that to a Three Waters program, and that just kind of reflects how significant the drinking water program's been for this council. I think more broadly in the capital spend, as recall, it seems like a lifetime ago, but in April we were talking about potentially utilising up to with carry forwards and new capital programs for this fiscal year of potentially doing up to $130 million in capital. One of the pieces of work that we will bring back to the council that we're doing now is just obviously, what is the capacity in the economy to actually deliver that size capital work program? How does our capital spend sit alongside government investment, private sector investment? Because I think what we want to make sure that we have is a sustainable multi-year pipeline of work, and that what we're alive to is that we're not supercharging sectors like civil or vertical construction so much that we drive up price escalation or quality issues, or that in 12 months' time, what we're getting is feedback from firms saying to us, well, you're expecting us to take on apprentices or invest in people or buy machinery. We need to know that there's more than just 12 months work in front of us. So I think quite a lot of work is going on around what does that capital work program look like for this year that we will bring back, but specifically on the Three Waters, we have no concerns about our ability to make the investments over the coming 12 months.
It's just that, Napier's going to have their projects, Central Hawke's Bay, there's going to be a lot of demand on the local providers to deliver, and then you've got big swimming pool out the back here, there's a whole lot of shovel-ready stuff that's coming down the pipeline, and it's just going to be quite crammed up.
So again, I think one of the things in the broader procurement capital spend is having a look at not just what we're doing, but what's going on in the region, but on Three Waters specifically. I think that the contrast that I'd make is that we've had for a number of years a very clear drinking water program, and we're not in the design phase. We've actually designed it. We've let contracts. All of our contracts are already in place.
Councillor Corbyn.
Two questions. The first one is, do you have a feel for how we'll end up operationally in terms of income and expenditure at the end of the 12 months?
It's still a little bit early to be definitive on what that outcome will be. There's a lot of what happens at year end is around ensuring that, excuse me, all the appropriate reserve transfers have been made, that projects have been sort of funded in the appropriate ways, whether that's debt or other means. And so there's quite a bit of wash-up work that happens at year end to fully understand that. Where I think we'll be is that we'll be in a similar position to last year. We'll have potentially a very small surplus, and potentially carry forward requests for projects that haven't been completed this year not being able to be carried forward because there's not sufficient funding to allow that to happen. So I think, yeah, it's a very similar position to last year with a sort of a small surplus.
Thank you. And the second question is page 32, Karamu strategy. And I know officers are reviewing the master plan, and the drivers that existed for this project have significantly changed. Will we be having a workshop on that, and when would that be happening?
Currently, officers are in negotiations with MB Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment for variations to the funding contracts. And the variations are primarily driven at the industrial strategy and sort of isolated development areas within the catchment. So the outcomes of the strategy, it will be an informing strategy for your master plan, which is the district plan. But we should be in a position to workshop with council on the direction of the Karamu strategy work, hopefully within the next 2 months once we've concluded those negotiations with MB.
Thank you.
Mayor Hazelhurst.
Kia ora, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, just firstly a comment and then a couple of questions. Having been in Wellington with the rural and provincial mayors and CEs on Thursday and Friday last week, we may think that our funding that we have received in partnership across many areas of government is normal. Can I just say that it isn't normal? So can I congratulate Nigel and the team for this significant sum of money that we have in partnership across many areas, not just the waters, but employment and all those opportunities that we've had to make sure that we're keeping our people employed. And there is, I spoke to one CE from Southland who was at that time in the afternoon trying to get some funding, and he'd been working all afternoon trying to do that. And so we accept that we've got our sum of money, and the government are looking at partnership across many areas that both local government and central government interlink and work together. And so it was very interesting and quite a revelation for me to hear how many districts and provinces across New Zealand haven't done what we have done. So that was so thank you. My question's around where we go to for here with our COVID recovery, and while the Mayor's Task Force is providing information from the sectors, I am really wanting more from the page 31 on our economy, and I want more information and I want more intel about opportunities for redeployment, and I want it up to date. So having an Infometrics report in March, where are we sitting in July? It's too long. So while we get retail stats regularly, we need to get sector response. We need to know how our apples are faring in the export markets around the world. We need to know how we can work and respond to different sectors. The wage subsidy is coming off, and we need to know the impact of that on our community. So that the information, I feel as though I'm not getting what I need to be able to for us to make informed decisions as a council to support our community. So that area is really key for us. And yes, we know our retail stats are performing well, but how many businesses have we lost from the CBD? Who's doing that kind of information, that intel, and bringing that back to us so we can seek out opportunities and work with the wider sectors. So that's just my question. I'd like to see us do more in that area. Kia ora.
If I could, through you, Madam Chair, just I agree with the issues that you're raising, Madam Mayor, and I think as you're aware, trying to get the balance right between supporting a regional approach and investments that we've made in entities like Business Hawke's Bay, in terms of getting business intelligence and information from the sector. And I think we've probably all been frustrated that we're flying a little bit blind, and the issues that you're raising around, well, we need more timely sort of information. And I think it's probably at that point around, well, yes, you know, how long do we continue to try and to get up through that approach versus just needing to get on in terms of, or could it be both? But I think at the moment, yes, I'm not going to disagree with you. Whilst we've got some indicators, we are flying blind in a number of areas around kind of lead indicators, business and sector information. So we will need to respond to that.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon.
Very briefly, thank you. I'd really like to support the comments just made by the Mayor. I was thinking of raising the same point. She's done better than I would have done. Yeah, we're going to see a very changed environment looking ahead. We're already in the middle of it, and it's hard to assess where the future lies. Particularly, I think the diversification of our economy has actually helped us greatly through this crisis, and we need to sort of be better informed as to how it's shaping up looking ahead, where our weaknesses are, our strengths and so on. So I just, yeah, totally agree with Sandra. I just want to add weight to what she said.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Regarding the very hideous drought that our primary sector has been through, I'm wondering if we can chase data regarding the impact of that. I know we can't actually collate the data. There will be another entity that does. And then overlay that with what we're looking at. Because if we go back and look at past droughts, we know that the Hastings economy tends to take a hit year 2 and 3. So that's another point of data collection that I think would help as we look ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a recommendation on page 19. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Sholem. Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Oh, okay. Yes, we're due for a tea break now, so we'll adjourn for 10 or 15 minutes, and I'll see you back here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just on the COVID recovery plan update, I'll take the report as read. There's a lot going on in support of the recovery plan that you adopted in May in lockdown. And what we've done to date is there's a sort of quite a comprehensive economic recovery program dashboard attached. We've used the RAG rating to signal where we have areas of concern, and I guess the premise that we're taking is that if there's one category in there that's red, the whole project's classified as red. If the project hasn't started yet, but we hadn't intended to start the project yet, then it's still on track and will be shown as green. But there has been a lot going on, and there's some points under 3.2 that detail some of the activity with a bit more narration. Just notice on point 3.2.7, third bullet point, it was actually $50 million that's been signalled for the three waters, not 27. And I think the other sort of positive impact that we're seeing is in the economic data that is coming out, and it is a bit patchy at the moment, but it is pointing to a positive recovery to date, and good consumer confidence across Hawke's Bay, the Hawke's Bay Gisborne area when compared to the rest of the country. So happy to take any questions.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Allen, page 27, the read regarding strategy development, liaise with primary sector regarding HPUDs and land development. Under the next box, no activity to liaise on at present. And we're waiting for a sub-nation L projections release. Is that a doofer of a typo, or is that some highfalutin document I don't know about?
Mr. Clues is responsible for that area, so it probably is something highfalutin, but possibly also a typo.
Okay, so I will speak to Mr. Clues and I'll find out what we're waiting for. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just looking at the dashboard on page 25 of the very first concern, employment services. Run regional talent attraction strategy to address skill shortages. What's that going to look like, and whereabouts are we going to target it?
So through you, Madam Chair, if I can, the work that we've been doing to support the Mayor's Task Force, and certainly the focus on employment, working with our partners, and particularly Annie Aranui at MSD, is to take a sector approach to employment and workforce development. So I think the assessment at the moment is we are quite well placed in the horticulture and viticulture sector with the work that apples and pears have been doing. Our focus at the moment, our teams are working together around working with the civil and vertical construction sector. And on the 11th of August, the council in partnership with EIT and MSD are bringing, invitations have gone out to 500 employers in civil and building sector, and we're bringing them together to actually paint a picture of what the work in front of us looks like. Make sure that our employers are aware of all of the assistance that's available through all of the new schemes that have been announced by government around the in-work apprenticeship wage subsidies, as the first step towards then bringing employers and talent together in terms of doing employment services and employment expos. So that's where things are at currently in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr. Other questions? Councillor O'Keefe.
Madam Chair, I just want to focus on 3.2.1, the Urban Centres Recovery Fund. The 150,000, 100,000 to Hastings, 40,000 to Havelock North, and 10,000 to Flaxmere. Look, I realise due process has been carried out, etc., etc., etc. But I want to know, is there room for movement? I've made my thoughts known around the peripherals, not so much within an official forum, that I'd like to have that topped up to $20,000. Our proposal has gone in, and it has been late going in, and there are reasons for that. One was to, I don't know if it's the right word, to regurgitate the Flaxmere Business Association. So we've done that.
Could I just cut in and suggest that you actually take that discussion offline to Councillor Dixon, sitting beside you, who has been the chair of that group?
Okay.
Okay?
We have done that.
Okay. Well, I suggest a three-way perhaps with the Mayor, Councillor
Is that
Dixon
right?
and yourself.
Short line out.
Yeah, short lineup, absolutely.
As long as they throw the ball in straight.
Absolutely.
Okay, will do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Barber.
Yeah, just, the reports of, you know, a lot of the Samoan and our Pacifica RSC workers going home as of late. Lots of flights heading back to the islands. In terms of the next season, what's the plan going forward?
Yeah, so the current status of RSC, we're starting to see some repatriation now. So certainly we had a group of Samoan workers head home on Friday. Some of the Solomon Island workers heading home this week. Still got quite a large number of RSCs still here, and a lot of work going on to support them. Sure, as council's aware, the government's made some policy changes that allow our RSC workers that can't get home to be able to work in other jobs now, which is a positive development. But yes, to your point, increasingly the work now with industry, and this is probably with council and particularly with the mayor in a leadership and advocacy role, is about what is the plan to, you know, because it's only 2.5 months away before we need. So the government has confirmed the numbers of RSC workers for next season, which is basically at this season's level, but with the caveat that border restrictions will apply. And so the whole thing now is what is the plan and the protocols to be able to get the RSC workers back, you know, for late October, early November when the season starts again. So I guess in summary it'd be, we've been very focused over the last couple of months about supporting the RSC workers whilst they're being here and trying to get them home, and we're now turning our mind to what's the plan to be able to get them back into the country.
So what's the plan B if plan A don't work? Because in plan C, if plan B don't work, you know, I mean.
One of the things that people may not be aware of is that the kiwi fruit crop in the Bay of Plenty this year was 90% picked by New Zealanders. So 29,000 New Zealanders have actually crossed the border since the beginning of COVID, and we're going to have a substantial number of our own citizens requiring employment. We have a recommendation. If somebody would like to move, please. Thank you, Councillor Sholem. And the seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Nixon. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Moving on to our next item, item 7, which is our quarterly report on health and safety. Right. Do you need to come forward, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm pleased to present this report. I take it largely as read, but I will make the comment that this report, obviously a bit later than it would normally come to you due to COVID, so my apologies there, but we did have that delay. So this was sent through via the hub back in May. It didn't have the level of detail that we normally report on, which is why I've brought it back now with the further analysis in there so you can see what our normal reporting would look like. Pretty good quarter, and as you'll probably see, it did start to peter off at the end of March with the fact that that's when we entered lockdown, so incident rates did dip down, and that's what accounts for a lot of these statistics being dropping off in March. So I'm happy to take any questions that you might have with regards to this.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As always, I'm concerned about contractors and how we can move them or keep moving them into a better space. Can you please explain to us what you are doing in this space?
Absolutely. So we've put quite a bit of effort into our contractors. So over the past couple of years, we've moved through the way that we do our procurement with the utilisation of regular contractors. We've moved them to a standardised process to check their health and safety at the start. So we use Sitewise along with the other councils in Hawke's Bay. We've moved to a standardised approach so that all contractors are playing fairly across all councils, which is good. So that helps with that side of it. The other thing we've moved into is just looking at increasing the monitoring of how our contractors perform. And that's why we're now doing regular safety observations on our contractors, which is we've been reporting through to you. And it's been pleasing to see that the results remain largely stable with the way that our contractors are behaving, and majority of them are excellent or good, with very few that are actually causing issues. And any that are causing issues, we follow up quite promptly at the time of the observational audit being undertaken. So if there was anything unsafe, we would stop work, make sure that it's safe before they were able to carry on.
Have we ever got to the point of removing work from a contractor because of health and safety issues specifically?
Yes, we have. We have worked through a couple of processes with some contractors due to the health and safety issues. It was not just health and safety. Unfortunately, what tends to happen is people that are performing poorly, health and safety-wise, tend to be performing poorly quality-wise as well. So it has been a contributing factor to the fact that they haven't been doing well. So yes, we have worked through some contracts where people haven't been performing appropriately.
Through you, Madam Chair, just I guess build on that. Some of the primary contractors, the larger ones who have a number of subbies, and this is definitely true in the vertical build space, have ended and terminated agreements with subcontractors who are not willing to perform at the level of the larger firm, and generally those actions tend to flow through and people take it seriously. And I guess just building on Ms. Cusman's earlier comment, through the COVID process, obviously we had to do a really significant task of signing off that all the contractors had COVID appropriate plans. One of the positive outcomes of that is that process in terms of sign off and approval, we're now looking at embedding as part of our normal procedures, which just adds an additional lens as well, just on that continuous improvement.
Thank you, Councillor Barber.
Kia ora. Just in terms of the health and safety of staff during COVID working from home, has there been any national kind of surveys over that time to look at not so much the safety side of things, but the health and probably health and wellbeing side benefits that have come from, because every time you have to jump in a car and drive, that's a risk.
Yep.
And the less, switch of the key, drive to work and all that kind of stuff. I'm just wondering if there's.
Yeah. So through you, Madam Chair, I mean, one of the things that we did twice through the lockdown period was staff surveys around how they were going wellbeing wise, but also at the end of sort of level 2 lockdown, as we moved to level 1, was surveying the staff about but basically learnings out of COVID, and no surprise, the biggest bit of feedback that we got from staff was we want to continue to hold on to some of these flexible ways of working, working from home. I guess the things that it highlighted were that we're currently doing work on. So we've just released a kind of flexible ways of working sort of policy, is that one person's idea of flexibility is another person's nightmare. So having read all the comments, for example, one staff member who said, "Oh, look, it's so awesome that I can organise my day around my kids, and if it's a nice day, go for a walk or a bike ride at lunchtime, and I do my work early in the morning or late at night." Then it's another staff member says, "Man, I'm really stressed out because do I respond to emails that I get at 10 o'clock at night from work colleagues?" So what we're having to do is work out new ways of working, team and communication protocols. But one of the issues that also was highlighted just from a straight out health and safety point of view is whilst a lot of staff appreciated working from home, they're not actually set up sustainably to work from home in terms of, ergonomic sort of furniture and all of that. So there's a bunch of things that we're having to work through. I think the other thing that we've just been very focused on recently from a organisational wellbeing, health and safety point of view is around resilience, and that, whilst a lot of people have enjoyed different ways of working, for a number of the sort of resilience issues that are around, I'm feeling a little bit freaked out about things are really uncertain. I just had a conversation that for some of our staff, like, well, I've just come back to work and now Hiratonga House is closed and I'm having to go back at work at home again. So there's a whole lot of things at play. But by and large, I think the approach that we've taken as an organisation is to actually, off the back of all the surveys and engaging with our staff, is looking for ways that we can carry forward some of this innovation and flexibility, whilst also being very live to the things that are going to need to change in the organisation for this to work sustainably going forward.
Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and just a comment first. I'm thrilled to hear that staff feedback's being sought around alternative ways of working, and that is potentially being embraced. That's really great to hear. It dovetails quite nicely into the question that I wanted to raise, which is during COVID and now post-COVID world, what are we doing to help our staff with home workspaces in terms of teaching them to set up proper workstations? Even just in the short time I was working from home, I've already given myself a form of RSI from not setting up my workstation properly. So just interested to know what support we're offering there.
What we have done is we've put together some guidance to help that. Unfortunately, the great guide that ACC had, which was Habitat Work website, has now been disestablished. But what we've been using is, because it was quite a good interactive one, we've been using one from the UK now, which is quite useful as well. So we send staff the link so that when they set up at home, they can actually set it up and have that feedback, because it's a bit hard to do it from a manual piece of paper. So some of those resources are really useful. Also just giving them some tips around how to remember to take breaks and stretches and things like that, because as we all get engrossed in our way of work, we often put ourselves in positions that are uncomfortable. So we're doing a lot of work around just educating people how to look after themselves.
Fantastic, thank you for that.
Councillor Hawke.
Just a brief, oh, hang on, I lost my place. Hang on, bear with me, sorry. Here we go. Just going through the incident summary. Quite interesting reading, eh? Very interesting reading, in fact. But what I want to know, like mostly employees, contractors, public, what I wanted to know is, we got a first aid course running here. How many employees on that? Is there a first aid assistant in close proximity if they needed it? You got that?
Definitely, that's a high priority that we have enough staff that are trained in first aid. So we regularly run first aid courses here for staff, and we ensure that we've got first aid stations everywhere and defibrillators in our community facilities as well, to make sure that we've got the ability to respond.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. I've just got a query around, obviously around the pools and Splash Planet, where there's quite a few incidents reported. And I mean, obviously it's the nature of the activity. But I guess my question is, how does it compare nationally or with similar other activities in other regions, etc.? Do we do those sort of what's acceptable, what's not, sort of kind of comparisons?
it's kind of hard getting data from other areas, but I do like to always put into perspective the incidents that we have. So we often have sort of in excess of 100,000 people going through those facilities over that period of time. So when you consider that the number of incidents versus the people going through there, that's 99.9% of the time people are not getting hurt at all, and the small number that are, it's quite minor. So when you look at that, you can look at some other organisations that publish their statistics, and ours is very similar to theirs. Yeah.
I'm very happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Just before we move on, I'm aware that the council does own a defibrillator. I have just conducted a random survey and nobody knows where it is. So I would suggest a sort of a familiarisation strategy might be in order. Thank you.
You're going to fess up to what
I don't know. No one, it's at reception. Thank you. Right, I'm going to put that motion, please. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you, Jimmy. Now, moving on to item 8, report to operations about Lagoima requests. Mrs. Evans.
I'll take the report as read and respond to any questions. Just to notice that the average number of days is really nudging up to our statutory limit of 20 days. That's due to COVID-19 and difficulty in getting hold of information that we hold during the lockdown.
Thank you. Any questions, Councillor Watkins?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Jackie, the information that's furnished to a requestee, is that information available for councillors to see, or is that private?
No, it's open. All the information we release is open information. If there's any confidential information, we redact it. So that is open for councillors.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do I have a mover and seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Dixon, and a seconder, Councillor Lawson. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Now, item 9, you again, Mrs. Evans. Items under action.
Yeah, this is just a list of items where councillors have requested updates. I suggest that any questions on any of them be directed to the group managers that are here.
Thank you. Could I have a mover and seconder for that motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Sholin. Thank you, Mayor Hazelhurst. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And now we have a recommendation to exclude the public. Could I have a mover? And so thank you, Councillor O'Keefe, and a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Sears. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Thank you. That was going to be my next question.